very important to all of us and to me personally. Speaking today is a privilege, but it's also been very difficult, yet very important personally to me. Thank you all for coming. My favorite old salt and Chief River Rat, Ardner, and his two hard-working mermaids arm wrestled me into speaking today back in February. I've been stewing and worrying and planning and writing outlines and writing speeches that all fell apart yesterday, and I'll explain that. So if I seem a little disorganized, I've totally modified my speech overnight and changed it a little bit this afternoon when I talked to some of the New York Mills grade school kids. I am Gary Doc Robinson. I was Doc to the Marines I served, and now I'm Dr. Doc to the people in New York Mills and Perham for the last 20 plus years. I am a Vietnam veteran. I trained as an enlisted Navy hospital corpsman and operating room tech, and I was stationed at the NSA Naval Hospital in DaNang as an operating room tech in Vietnam from mid-December to June 1st of 69 and 70. I did a short period of time with the first Marines, Hill 10, somewhere west of DaNang, the DaNang defense perimeter, and tried as hard as I could be to be a field corpsman. This is my fourth time, as I call it, up against the wall. My first time, I was visiting in-laws in Washington, D.C., and I kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off because I was frightened to go there. I finally caught the commuter train, and on a cold, drizzly, dark D.C. night, I visited, like I went to Vietnam, the wall alone, and I left alone. What I remember of that visit was just overwhelming to me. I all of a sudden had a sense of fear and terror and confusion and horrendous memories. I walked away from there quickly and tried to bury all of that. My second visit to the wall was on a nice sunny summer day. I spent much more time there. I saw many visitors there, leaving mementos before the wall, crying, meeting old brothers in arms. I read name after name after name on the wall, but I couldn't identify a single name. I went away from there feeling numb, alone again. I couldn't cry, and I was feeling a little bit crazy because I couldn't identify any of the names on the wall. My visits to the wall are a bit of a personal history. They'll be of a history of others, and they're a history of healing. So as not to bore you to death, though, and because Pam and my daughter make me watch Project Runway, I'm going to give you a little hat fashion show. This is one of my favorite fishing hats. I haven't put this on in years. This is my Vietnam boonie hat. You like it? Yeah?
Okay.
I put beads on it and a little memento and took a lot of grief from a gunny sergeant when I was with the Marines, but I still wore it. My third visit to the wall was a couple of years ago with my daughter visiting in Washington, D.C., but I went to the wall alone. For the first time I let memories start to come. I still couldn't identify a name, But in the meantime, there was a memorial to the women who served in the war. I started remembering the nurses I worked with. They were excellent nurses. They worked incredibly long hours. To both the corpsmen and the Marines and to the doctors, they served as wives, sisters, mothers, children, and they kept me partially sane while I was there. I don't remember those names. I know one of those nurses died in Vietnam. And I was able to begin a tiny bit to grieve. And I sat on the bench there, and someone finally talked to me, and I wasn't alone. And I fought, but I shed a tear. When I started planning for this speech, it has annoyed me for 30 plus years that I don't know a name on the wall. So I began to reflect. Though his name is not on the wall, a name came back to me. Also, a very powerful memory came back to me to help me heal my crazies and my depression, my suppressed emotions, and my post-traumatic stress symptom problems. These include feeling alone, feeling isolated, getting depressed through all of those years. And suddenly, yesterday afternoon, it's totally destroyed my plan for my speech for the last months. I started researching a name on the wall, and I want to talk to you about that. My original speech was to ask you all to read between the names. There are veteran friends I have now, people in this audience, and all Americans, to some degree, had some of these emotions. So if you don't know the name on the wall, I have one for myself now, and I'd like to introduce you to it. But I first originally started to read between the lines and think of the people whose names aren't on the wall. I worked in an operating room. Almost every day I worked in the operating room and volunteered for triage. I bagged up my comrades and took them to a place called Graves Registration. I took South Vietnamese forces to Graves Registration. I took Vietnamese civilians. I took Vietnamese kids. I took our enemies to Graves Registration. At the end of a shift, you get so calloused and so controlled of your emotions in order to stay sane working with casualties. My last duty was to take a laundry cart full of body parts to Graves Registration and check them out with the people who work there. You got so calloused, then I'd go off to breakfast. I'm trying to uncover and overcome those emotions that I expressed for 30 years plus.